Hello and welcome back, guys. Starting exactly where we left off, we have the Darkwood gate in here. We want this to be a nice new door, however we want to maneuver it and mess with it. So I'm going to double click this. It's going to reprompt me, very similar window that we saw before. It's going to say, hey, this is all new to this project. Okay, so this is meshes, this is PNGs, textures, shaders, and anything that it needs to reference. You do not need the scripts. Okay, you do not need the scripts. If you're dumb like me and you deleted it, you do need the scripts. Okay, so we do want to reference these scripts in this case. Otherwise, that's it. All right, so we're going to have the animations, we're going to have the animation controller, the Raven and all this stuff. I'll show you why we typically don't want those unless you want the Raven to show up and say, hey, we learned a new project or a new item. So pulling this in, we're going to click import. It's going to give me all the DLLs, all the meshes, textures, everything. You cannot, as far as I know, choose the file structure in which these get brought in. They get brought in how the package was made, which in this case mimics the Valheim install. So it'll be prefab instance, scripts, and all that stuff, shaders, materials. It'll all be separated out on this left-hand side. All right, so once that's brought in, you'll notice that you have all the other folders with the prefab instance, door, forge in this case. The reason why it brought in the forge is because you actually need the forge and the piece workbench and all that stuff to build the Darkwood gate. So when you create a package, it includes all dependencies. In this case, it also includes the annoying bird that happens to pop up and say, hey, guess what? You built a door. It's awesome. It's super cool, right? Well, if you didn't want that, and you don't want all the other assets, you can remove them. So this also grabbed what it takes to build it. So we know that it takes stone, tar, wood, whatever. So in that a previous prompt, you can choose, once you get a little bit more acclimated to bringing in items, maybe you've even already brought in the bird or already brought in the workbench, let's say, that you don't want to re-import those. If you re-import them, they will overwrite, so be careful. So we're going to mess with this door here, but since this is a project standalone, I actually don't need to duplicate this. Most of the time you would click it and hit Control D and duplicate the door. I don't need to. Everything in this project is technically unique to this project now. So I know what material is referencing what. It keeps things simplified. So I'm going to drag this to custom items. And as you can see, we have a door here. Typically, the materials and the meshes and anything that's referenced for this door, I will put this in a folder. So I'm going to say, tutorial door, like tut door, right? I'm going to bring in the door in here, and I will bring in the material that's related to the door. So I'm going to open up the door, and as you can see, everything looks fine. We have all of our snap points. Keep in mind the names on snap points on doors and build pieces. These matter because Valheim actually references that, and it does reference the layer as well. So make sure your layers are set to pieces for snap points. And I'll get into more of that a little bit later. So to describe some of the Valheim Unity know-hows, snap points do need the layer of piece, as I've mentioned. My headset did slightly die, so I don't exactly know what just happened. I'm not listening to much sound, so it canceled out on me. But snap points, the naming convention matters here. The layer matters. Make sure you have roughly 31 layers. This is a very decent Valheim rip that we have pretty much everything that we need. Okay. So Darkwood Gate, this name up here is counting as the prefab name. So this is going to need to change and be unique. If we notice in Darkwood Gate, we brought in the sprite atlas. So we're going to have every single sprite, but if you notice, it's not by itself. So make these icons are 64 by 64. So feel free to take a new picture, download something, however you need. So getting this item into the game is going to take a few things. First thing is to set up the asset. That's everything that's related to this asset. I do like to keep next door neighbors and reset things up. So like the material folder, the scripts folder usually only has the DLLs that we actually brought in. Shaders, I don't really mess with shaders or anything like that. I don't mess with the physical materials. I don't mess with the meshes unless it's a custom mesh. I tend to just leave them all here. For the most part, I'll bring in any, let's say, custom texture or anything that I want to change, right? So I'm going to change the material up a little bit so we can visibly see that this is a different darkwood door. And I'm going to change the prefab name. So you can double click down here, or you can actually double click up here and do a slow double click, of course, to get this prompt. We're going to say tut door. And yes, I want to rename the file. So if you notice, it changes it down here. And we have some things on the Valheim know-hows that they use a $ as a token. The token, it allows them to translate and say, hey, this needs to be translated in the game to either English, German, French, Spanish, whatever. Building categories, these are their scripts, and if you notice, they came in just fine. We didn't have to use ng script recovery or anything like that. The LOD group, the previous thing that we mentioned before, if you happen to get an error on whatever item you brought in, this is how to fix it. Certain things have a high or a low, right? So as we click on them, we can see that this is a little bit less quality than this. That is kind of what the LOD is meant to do. You can either completely unload the item, or you can say, hey, when you get this far out, right, make it less detailed. And then once it goes to cull, it's saying that it's unloaded from the world. All right, and you can kind of take these sliders here and change them however you want. Good LODs allow for great performance for your mods, so keep that in mind for any item that you bring in. So the door comes with a door script, comes with a ZNet view, which is required on all Valheim items. If you do not have this, it will not load in the game. Make sure that this is a guaranteed script that you have on anything you bring into the game, okay? Super important, super important. Cannot stress that enough. Most of the time, it will have another script associated with it that is called a Z-Sync transform. In this case, this prefab does not have it. 9 times out of 10, you will see it on every prefab. Do not remove the ZNet view or the Z-Sync transform if it happens to have it, okay? So colliders, of course, you can set up your own colliders. And if you notice, we can see where it is, but we actually can't see what's going on, right? That's because I don't have gizmos turned on. So gizmos, you can see, oh, hey, look, that's a collider, right? You can see exactly what counts as a collider in a wireframe. And to navigate, I'm right-clicking and using WASD to fly. Unity is very intuitive, kind of makes sense for most people that play games. If you are lost on how to use Unity, I'm not going to use that and explain all of that. But let's get this into the game. Let's do the bare minimum, get this into the game, get it rolling. So since all of our materials and all of our textures are unique to this, I do recommend renaming them, setting them up, and reattaching them to the prefab. So I'm going to start with that first, and then we'll mess around with these scripts in this animator here and go into further detail with that. So first thing, go to the mesh layer, find it. Most of the time it looks like this. It'll say mesh renderer, mesh filter. We have a high, a low, and we have a collider. We have a new and a high and a low, and this references a shader, which is a custom piece, and then a few other things, right? So the main thing that we need is go to the first mesh layer, which in this case is this. I'm going to click on the picture, and I'm actually going to drag this. This is my texture, so I want this. I'm going to put it into my tut door folder. And that is a texture, not a material, so I did not put it in my material. But I'm also going to click that, and you notice that it highlighted it for me. I'm going to drag it in here. And then the same thing. Drag that one in here. And same thing with the noise. Noise I would leave out here, potentially, because it's going to be referenced in a lot, and I do mean a lot, of the prefabs. All right? So you can choose to pull it in. Just make sure that most of the time when you bring in a new prefab that you don't exclude the noise if you happen to move it. Because most of the time you want that referenced for whatever mod that you're making, and that's a good thing to have. So if you have some weird things going on with the shader, you would switch this to a standard shader here. So switching it to a standard actually makes it look a little bit darker, looks a little bit more like it's intentional, but it does change the way it looks. If you notice, we have a max metallic. I don't necessarily want that. Play around with it, make it custom, do whatever you want. I'm going to leave it as a custom piece, or a standard in this case, just because, but I am going to tone down that and make it look a little bit more normal. And you can, of course, crank up smoothness or not if you want it to be reflective, etc. So play around with it, learn Unity. If you know Unity, then keep going. So next thing, the low, we have all of these. They are currently referencing, as I clicked on that, it's currently referencing the correct stuff. So I'm going to rename this. I'm not going to call it the Darkwood Gate material or the Darkwood Gate anything. Main reason is I don't want it to reference anything or conflict with anything that's in a vanilla game. So set this up. I'm going to call this Tut Door, and this is an albedo, so albedo. And here we are. And then I'm just going to call this one Tut Door, and then I think this is metallic. I'm not too good on my shaders, so I do happen to know that this is a normal map, so I'm going to call this Tut Door normal map. Right? So all we need now is, because we're going to use that material, this is an okay material. I want to use that material, but I want to drag it into this folder. So I'm going to go to their material folder that brought this in. We do have a Darkwood Gate mat. We have a door and a mat here. I'm going to drag both of these, all three of these. And these are the worn, aka it took damage or whatever. So I'm going to drag all three of these, and I'm actually going to pull these into the material folder. So within the material, you can double click on the material, and you'll see that it references whatever we have here. Okay? And then references whatever we have here. If you did this in the other project, it would reference the vanilla stuff. You would have to duplicate that. You would have to set it up and get a new material and get things rolling. That way you're not conflicting with anything that is in vanilla. That is the main thing that we used to have to do. And this way, this makes it a little bit cleaner. As long as you rename it, all of your references are already set up. You don't have to drag this to the normal map. You don't have to move this over here, etc. So if you want to make it more metallic, you can drag this to the metallic, and you can see that it does change it a little bit, and you can make it a little bit less metallic. It'll still be dark. So I'm going to make sure it's negative. You can switch to albedo alpha. Again, play around with it, make it look decent. You can turn on and off the lights in Unity. And so for now, we can ignore the warnings here. It's create a convex mesh. Most of the time, this is going to be something that you would need to fix if you knew Blender. I don't know Blender. I'm not very good at it. So I'm going to ignore it. Most of the time, it does not show up in the game. If it does, that will be something that you need to learn and then figure out how to fix. Okay? So main thing, we can see all of our colliders. I don't need to know any of this. I have my door. I have my materials. Main thing to make it look like Valheim, okay, is point no filter mode. So if you have a brand new texture or an asset, whatever, and then compress this. So when we rip the game, we have massive non-compression. So compress this. I recommend just compressing it to where it doesn't look like a potato. I do usually do high quality and use crunch compression and say yes. And one big thing is make sure it's read and write enabled. Sometimes you'll get errors saying that it's not read and write enabled. And I'm going to shift click in this case or control click in this case to click both of these and set these both up the exact same. And I think I chose the other one to be 128, high compression, and crank that up. Let me verify. Yeah, so 128. So all of these are compressed. So what that means is now it's significantly less in size for my asset bundle. So we have a door. We have some scripts. I'll quickly run through the scripts, and then I'll show you how to bring this into the game very fast. And then in some different videos, I'll go over Valheim code, need-to-knows, how to harmony patch, publicizing your assemblies, and actually setting up a coding project. So we're going to kind of stop here in this video once I go over the scripts and once I go over how to download and set up an asset bundle and actually get ready to bring it into code. So without further ado, let's go ahead and set up the rest of our prefab. We do have a Darkwood Gate icon here. I recommend downloading a plugin from the asset store. It's a preview generator. There's a few others in the Odin Plus Discord, but this is 64 by 64. Make sure that you click this, and then you would be able to turn the texture type into a sprite. This, I'm using the normal map as an example, but you would switch it to a sprite, and then you would be able to drag it into the icon box here. I'm going to call this piece_tut door. And this is just a tokenized version of my name. So if I'm trying to localize it, you'd want to know exactly what this actually is. We want this build piece to be enabled. I want it in, let's say, the miscellaneous category in this case, just so I can find it faster. Do I want this to be an upgrade piece? This is mainly used for workbenches and things like that. So the comfort level, you can set the comfort level. You can set the comfort type, whether it's a ground piece and whatnot. Check all these off as you walk through them. Is it a water piece? Should it be on the ground only? Should it no clip? Is it allowed in dungeons? Set this up however you want. Play around with it, bring it into the game multiple times, get it to the way you want. But if you notice, we're referencing a crafting station of forge. This is referencing our forge that's set up here, which happens to be ripped from the game. And we'll see that this also has a LOD group and it has all of its own configurations. It's okay to bring it in like this, but keep in mind, anything that you did not compress and anything that you happen to mess with that does have the exact same tokenized names, exact same icons, prefab names, whatever, that you bring into your asset bundle. If it matches vanilla, you will overwrite vanilla for as long as your mod is installed, okay? So if you're referencing a crafting station, I would recommend doing that in code, not in Unity. So I would, in this case, delete the crafting station. I just clicked it and I hit the delete key. Resources, I would typically do the same thing. I would do this in code. I would not do it in Unity. If you have to do it in Unity, make sure you're compressing it. Okay, so if it has each one of these are item drops. Item drops are a script that's attached to it. It's an item in the game. If we click on it and open it up, we'll see that this wood also has a shader. All of these albedos and all of that stuff, all of those need to be compressed. I would make sure that these are compressed. If you compress the sprite atlas, which is the thing that has all the photos and pictures and whatever, if you happen to include that in your item drop, your piece, your anything really in your project that references this, and you happen to say, hey, I want this 64 by 64, it will make every single icon in the game look like it was taken with a potato. Okay? So keep that in mind. I recommend keeping your asset itself as clean as possible in Unity. If you are using the piece manager, you can go here and rename your shader itself and completely wipe out all of these. Rename your shader itself to a underscore. So I'll type it underscore replace underscore and then the actual name. So in this case, it'll be darkwood underscore gate door. And it will replace all of the materials for you so you don't have to actually reference these in Unity. Super helpful hint there. I am going to keep all of these pictures and go against my own word for sheer sake of time. But go through, fix it up, configure it, set things up. Wear and tear script means it takes damage. As you can see it, new, worn, and worn means, hey, it's a brand new door. Hey, the door took damage. And these are referencing, as we can see on the left-hand side here, either high quality, low, or it took damage, stuff like that. So configure your piece, set it up. I'm going to remove the item drops here because I don't need them, and I will be using the piece manager, and I'll show you both with and without the piece manager. But configure this however you want. Go to the door script. This token name, I do recommend being the exact same. So I think I called mine, tut door. So I'm going to actually copy this entire thing and go down here and paste it. So this references the door. And this will have open effects and close effects. If you're having weird effects, let's say like weird white boxes and stuff like that, it could be that your shader on that item looks funky. So if we open this, we'll see that nothing has a shader. We're A-OK. But if it was the build function, so if we actually go to the tutorial door here and we go into the piece script, we'll actually see a place effect, size elements, right? We'll jump to VFX place wood wall, and I'll double click here just to show you. We'll highlight it and we'll say restart. And this is exactly what I mean. It's white. It's pure white. We don't know why, right? But we actually do. That is your shader is trying to use one of the custom shaders in the game. If you switch this to standard and you hit restart, you'll potentially still have this issue. Most of the time, if you just take and switch a few things around, in this case, I'll change it to, a fade or something of that nature to try and actually get smoke. I would do this in code. I would use this with the shader replacer or the material replacer in Piece Manager. Or if you have to bring it into your asset bundle, at least make it look relatively normal, okay? Make sure that most of your shaders are normal and look all right. So that looks fine. We are technically ready to bring this into the game, but there's a few things we need first. So one of the main things is in the tutorial door, we need to turn this and put this into an asset bundle. So we're going to go to Window, Package Manager. And once this loads, and mine's giving a little quick error here, it's stormy in my area, so we're going to want to find AssetBundle Browser. It's right here, if it lets me click on it. There we go. And we're going to install this. And once this finishes, we're going to use this to create our asset bundle, and I'll show you how. So it says remove. You can remove at any time. Feel free to go through here and grab a few other things if you wish. Pro Builder used to work. It was basically Blender inside of Unity. It no longer works for the most part. It may or may not work in later asset rip versions or in Valheim versions. So keep that in mind. But the main thing is we are ready to create an asset bundle. So I'm going to go to Window, Asset Bundle Browser. And in my case, it opens in a different screen. But if you grab the tab right here, you can actually pull this in and move it here so it doesn't open in a big window on a different screen. All right, so we're going to click on the door. And in the bottom right, which I have stretched out, of course, it usually will be a little bit smaller. But you'll go and click here and click New. And if it lets you type in the box immediately, like it does in my case, you should be fine. If not, click away, click back, and click New again. Sometimes that is a bug. But we're going to call this Tut Door Bundle. And now we have an asset bundle. And our prefab and all dependencies of the prefab are now attached to this bundle. Okay? So we're going to see weird stuff in the game because I did not go through and fix Hugin, which is the bird. I didn't go through and fix the place effects for everything. Go through your asset bundle or your asset itself and build that. So on the build page, we'll be able to see, drag any assets here or right click or whatever. And we're going to build. So we have the build bundle, and it takes a second. It'll build the bundle for us. The smaller the bundle, the smaller the prefabs, the less prefabs you have, the faster it loads. If you need to force a rebuild, you can check this box off, but this will be super fast for us, and we'll get that configured and pulled into the game. And almost done. All right, and once it completes, we'll go to the build page here. We'll see that this is going to output to Asset Bundle's standalone windows. You can tell this to output wherever you want. Most of the time, it's going to say it's going to standalone windows or whatever, wherever, whatever you want it to call it. Most of the time, leave it standalone windows, change this path if you need to. But the fast way to get there is to actually right-click down here, Show in Explorer, and we're going to click on Valheim Tut, which is our main folder. And we're going to see Asset Bundles, Standalone Windows, which is our path in the background here. We have the Tut Door Bundle, and we can see that this is kind of sizable. I didn't remove dependencies. I didn't compress a whole lot of things. I probably didn't even fix some of the shaders. So keep that in mind when you bring things in, which is why it's best to keep a simple Unity project. So in the next video, I'm actually going to show you how to bring this bundle into the game and publicize our assemblies and get our project and everything and our code set up. So in the next video, we're going to publicize things, get our code ready, and then the next video after that, we'll pull this asset bundle in. So see you in the next few.